gonna have to give it away when you're listening to this one. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week we are discussing the Red Hot Chili Peppers and their 1991 album, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, their first album with Warner Brothers, and their commercial breakthrough in many ways. This is the one that allows them to still sell out stadiums. So, a big one. And I know this is one of your favorite bands, and we've discussed them before here, actually. It's our second time doing them. We did their most recent album back in December. If you haven't listened to that one, please do so. And yeah, I had a feeling we'd be coming back to the Chili Peppers for your picks, because you are definitely a fan of these boys.
Always try to get back to the Peppers. Always enjoy all of them, even by themselves as just genius musicians. Even the part players, you know, because we see so many, I shouldn't say so many, but we see different guitarists throughout their history. Right now, on this album, we have John Frusciante, who is actually the second guitarist.
Yes.
He came in after the passing of the prior guitarist from Heroin, which we'll touch on too, because it has ties into production and whatnot, but always awesome to get back and talk about these boys regardless. I picked this one tonight because this always seems like their flagship record. Whether Californication, Blue, you know, whether One Hot Minute was one that took you to a different place, this one always for me was them. And like you said, and right on the point, this one was them coming into, I'll say, the mainstream eye. Like, it's hard to imagine just the popular music scene period without a Red Hot Chili Peppers. But at this point, they were, I won't say unknown, because Mother's Milk had made its impact and imprinted itself on the ears of some listeners, but they were not known like we know the Chili Peppers today coming into this. So this one always was, for me, the one. This is the one you see tattooed on people. You know, it's almost like their emblem, so to speak, as far as the cover image goes. But yeah, definitely one that brought them to all of us.
Yeah, and you did live through this era, so I'm kind of curious, like, did you get this, like, when it was contemporaneous and newly released?
No, this was 91. I was too young to be picking up an album like this. I mean, I was definitely hearing these singles on the radio all the time, and I loved the sound, and I knew I dug them, but it wasn't at a point in my life where I was picking up albums. I probably picked this up later on, probably around 95, 96. I definitely I remember having it in my, in my possession throughout, I guess, like middle school and whatnot, or you know, 7th or 8th grade. But it was not one that I had in my hands on day one.
Around One Hot Minute era, you finally picked up on it.
Exactly. And again, not so much on their sound, but that was when I was getting into an age where I was allowed to pick up albums, you know,
Right.
Especially, you know, Chili Peppers, and we'll talk about it some more throughout, but they, coming out of Mother's Milk, and I'm just imagining my folks. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with my parents about it, but they are a little bit of a scarier band for your child to listen to. You know, they have a very hardcore look to them. They have a very hardcore sound to them. In the days of the moshing, and the days of the, you know, the slam dancing, and the days of getting in there, they were at the top of that scene. I mean, even you want to talk about the hardcoreness or just that punk aspect of where they were coming from. This album was actually dedicated to Mike Watt, who is an American bassist, but everybody knows him from bands like the Minutemen and Firehose. But he's an influence in that, and that's where they were coming from. They were young punk guys, so definitely not one that I think was really able to be picked up by the younger guys. Not especially not me, for fear of this punk movement, so to speak.
Yeah. But what's so interesting is it really, I think, is quite a contrast to, because so much of this era you hear in retrospect, grunge. This is so the antithesis of that. But It's also the antithesis of its predecessor sounds, mostly hair metal. This is, it's different in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot going on here. I do think it came about at a very interesting time and was unlike other stuff, and it did a lot for this band, and they're still a huge band to this day. So
you weren't even there, but you hit it right on the head. That sound was so different and so funkier. I'll use the word funk because they use it and they emit that funk, but it was something as a young bass player, of course, looking at Flea and looking at what he was doing with this new sound, it was just something that jumped right out there to me.
Yeah, but how did it all come about? I guess we got to figure that out because
yeah,
we got to go to that. So this was actually the band's first album with a new label, in this case, Warner Brothers. What a great era for Warner Brothers, early 90s. So many great acts at this time. And they signed because Mo Austin was so different. He congratulated them on a deal with a different label. And they said, wait a minute, no, we have to go with this guy. And he had his connections and he was able to get them on his label. And major player label, he was going to be label mates with Madonna and Prince. And 1991, hard to get bigger than those two. So they really had a major backing behind them for this. So this was going to be a big deal for them. And they knew it.
Yeah, and speaking to Kiedis and that interaction, they were getting dragged through the dirt trying to come into the house that they were. Was it EMI? Where they were supposed to land, or were they coming out of EMI?
They were coming out of EMI.
They were coming out of EMI, wherever they were supposed to land. Long story short, Warner Brothers jumping in there, swooping in there, and playing the power of positivity card, the congratulations, or almost. The way I take it is that tongue-in-cheek congratulations. It was hopefully sincere, but it was a very, very awesome play because as a big label, you're watching these boys who you think can do it get dragged through the mud, and then you're swooping in like, hey, congratulations, man. I wish we could have got you. And then boom, you flip that real quick and put it in the Warner Brothers house. That's huge. That's huge. Well played. And I'm happy it went like that because I don't know if we'd have the Chili Peppers that we got throughout the 90s without that Warner Brothers play, because even coming out of Mother's Milk and they've said this, so it's not just speculation, but they were really feeling pushed down creatively because on Mother's Milk, they were getting all these notes like play heavier metal kind of riffs, do this, do that, write the lyrics this way. And they were feeling that crunch. They were ready, and they were ready to open up. And who better to open up any band, in my opinion, than the one and only Rick Rubin?
Yeah, most definitely. But I think you're absolutely correct that being with Warner Brothers allowed them to do that because they had a reputation as an artist label, and Prince had a huge dispute with them not too long after this, but they let their artists have creative control and let them do their thing. Like Prince, actually his albums weren't even listened to until they were finished because they just knew he's going to do his thing. And so they were going to be at a place where they were going to be allowed a lot of creative freedom. And yeah, Rick Rubin, this was their first album with him. And up to this point, Rubin had primarily been a hip-hop producer. He was best known for working with Run DMC. But he was somebody that this band really connected with musically, and he was ready to work with them. And he had a crazy idea for them. He said, you gotta work in an unusual environment. So he suggested the mansion of the late Harry Houdini for this band to record the album in, and most of them lived there, not Chad Smith, because he had a wife, but everybody else lived there. And Flea's brother-in-law actually filmed a documentary about the making of the album, Funky Monks. I haven't seen it, but I'd be curious to now after this. And yeah, they were in a prime spot to succeed at this point. And album was released in September of 1991. And it wasn't immediate. It took some time to catch on, but it ended up going up to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. And they went on a massive tour throughout 91 and 92 with openers such as Pearl Jam and the Smashing Pumpkins. This era was definitely my favorite chapter to read about in the book of Scar Tissue, because not only we get to hear about the process behind the songs on this album, we got to hear about the touring with these other iconic bands of the era. And it just was really fascinating reading, in my opinion. So
yeah, you want to talk about a tour? I just on paper, you're going on tour and you're like, all right, I'm going to put Pumpkins on here, and then you get a call from a friend who says, look, I got up and comers called Pearl Jam. Can you have them open for Pumpkins? Pumpkins will open for you. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. Halfway through the tour, the label's like, hey, man, you're getting too big for this Pearl Jam thing. You know, Pearl Jam hasn't hit their run yet. And they're like, we're going to put Nirvana on this. Or yeah, right. Yeah, we're going to put Nirvana on this. And then Corgan's like, nah, no way, because he had beef with Kurt because of Courtney. And then it ends up being Pepper's Nirvana Pearl Jam. Like, you got to be kidding me as far as a show goes. I always thought I would have loved to see that show. To see that show.
And
what a lineup.
all those bands were having released seminal albums in 1991.
Right?
Yeah, speaking of Nirvana, listen to our Nevermind episode if you haven't, because we went into that one and Pearl Jam did 10. And interestingly, this album, as successful as it was, it didn't even end up selling quite as much as those two, but still huge numbers, over 13 million copies sold worldwide.
Yeah.
As of now, 7 times platinum in the US. It's their second highest selling album. Californication outsold it by a couple million copies, actually. But this is the one a lot of people see this as their definitive album, and it's widely considered their best. And most recently, in Rolling Stone's 2020 list of the 500 greatest albums, this was number 186.
There you go. And I still have to believe, knowing who Rick Rubin is and knowing how just tuned in he is, you know, talk about the diverse amount of artists and the diverse crew that he's worked with throughout. You know, he turned down the Peppers years prior. I think it was like 87 because of drug use, you know, and he's like, nah, you guys, sorry, I won't produce the album because of your heavy drug use. But he kept that in mind, you know. He knew who these guys were. They're looking for a spot. This is pre-Shangri-La. And like you said, he puts them up in Harry Houdini's mansion. I love Rick Rubin. I'm sorry. I go off on these Rick Rubin genius tangents, but this is that album because not only of the creative place that they were in, but the nurturing and genius way to go about it provided by Rick Rubin. He just knows how to get this sound out of these bands. And for this one, again, the reason why it's this album is because he brought so many different dynamic sounds out of them that not that weren't there, but that were overshadowed in Mother's Milk by so much distortion and just heavy nonsense. He really brought out, in my opinion, a very personal feeling from all of these musicians and from the Peppers as a whole.
Yeah, and it's why they keep going back to him all these years later.
Yeah, he's the man.
He keeps, and he's done a lot for a lot of people, but the Peppers are definitely one of his top clients to this day. So a lot to be said for that. But this is where it all began for this team. And with that being said, I'm ready to dive into this album. So before we get into that, be sure to follow us on social media at Turntables and Tea Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, at Turntables Tea on Twitter, and subscribe to us wherever you are listening. And also rate us, leave us a nice review. We'd love your kind words, always appreciated.
Let's do it.
All right, so
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
The album begins with The Power of Equality. This is a social commentary too. We talk about racism, sexism, prejudice. This isn't the first thing I really think of when I think of the Chili Peppers. I don't see them as like the great social commentators of our time, musically. But I enjoy this song. I think it's a really fun, funky opener. Love the drums and horns especially. And I mean, Kiedis is almost rapping on this song. And that's some of that hip hop influence I think we're getting from Rick Rubin. If you want rap rock, that's your guy, Run DMC. I don't think it's a hard hitting piece lyrically, but I think it's a strong enough groove that I end up enjoying this as an album opener, and I think it's a great way to set the stage for what's to come.
It is. It's a cool opener. I'll use great. It's a great opener. The tempo is there. It gets us rolling. It has a Peppers feel. It has in my opinion, I think it was a great opener in the sense of it kept that feel coming off of Mother's Milk. So instead of putting one of these tunes that we'll hear later on that were newer to the sound of the Chili Peppers, we opened with one that was Chili Pepper-esque. Like you said, you got Kiedis almost rapping throughout, really seeing. Again, I go back into this personal aspect that I believe Rick Rubin really brought out of these boys, and seeing even shout outs to, the Times, Public Enemy. You really just start to see a very personal take from Kiedis and the boys here. There's meaningful lyrics in this one. And I'll say this, and I don't even think this is a hot tea take, but I'll say hot tea take. Sometimes Kiedis ends up in a bit of a tangent in some of his lyrics. I won't use the word non-meaningful. They're almost fantasy-like. I keep going back to the word dribble. It's not dribble, but he ends up using these phrases that aren't necessarily very easy to figure out, I guess I would say. But these ones are not. These are powerful, meaningful Kiedis lyrics throughout. It says its piece, and I'm right with you. This is a great opener for this album.
Yes, and it goes right on into the next song. I couldn't even tell I was listening to different songs upon first listen of this, but because it's such a seamless transition. But we are on to a different song. Track number 2, If You Have to Ask. Now this is a song lyrically doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't think it's necessarily supposed to, but it really doesn't have the most concrete point. I do like the sound of it. I think there's some real classic soul that we hear in the chorus, which I enjoy. It was actually the 5th single off of the album. Didn't chart because, late in the album cycle. And it was an odd choice. I would not have made this a single at all. It's not a bad song. It's fun to listen to, but it doesn't really have a concrete point to it like the best songs here do.
Exactly.
And that's why it loses some ground for me.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said it, because the seamlessness here for me is not very seamless, in the fact of we go from powerful, meaningful Kiedis lyrics to, in my notes, I have empty Kiedis here, because there's not much to these. And even though you got a bass line that rolls out, these are constants, in my opinion, of the Chili Peppers. So, of course, you can have Flea rocking out a bass line. Of course, at the 2:39 mark, you can have this beautiful Frusciante solo that ends up with applause that was never taken out. You can have all that. You can have Chad drumming his butt off, but unless it's brought together by Kiedis, it loses. And this one for me loses a lot coming off of Power of Equality, because they're so similar. You've already heard that I will tell you that Rick Rubin is a genius, but even right here at track 2, I feel like we've already had a pacing mishap, and I feel like this song loses a lot from where it sits here. Never one of my favorites, because again, you get a powerful Kiedis and then you get a weak Kiedis, and the weak Kiedis is always going to end up being the worst, in my opinion. This is not my favorite, and just not where it's at on this album. It loses a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think it's a real hot tea take for me to say this, but objectively speaking, Anthony Kiedis is the least musically talented member of this group.
I don't think that's a hot tea take. I don't think that's a hot tea take.
I didn't think it was. Like, he's not the most technically gifted singer. Nobody's gonna say that. I mean, the other guys are, I mean, Frusciante's a virtuoso on the guitar. Like, these other guys are pretty high quality, top of the game when it comes to their instruments. Kiedis isn't always top of the game when it comes to his, and he can be the best part about a song or the worst part about a song, and I think that's really key. But I think that's part of what makes this band interesting to discuss too. So
yeah, no, you said it really awesome right there. This band thrives and fails on Kiedis in so many senses, where he lacks, and I don't think this is a hot tea take, but maybe it's just our opinion here, but where in my opinion, where he lacks that technicality, he doubles, triples, makes up for it in his front man power. He's a great front man. He has energy. He 150 million% loves, the music, and he loves the band. He loves those brothers. And you can feel that no matter what. So I think that always propelled him higher as far as the Peppers going. But I don't think it's a hot tea take to say that he technically is probably the least gifted. Oh man, that's so tough to say out of my mouth, but you know what I'm saying. Out of the four.
Yeah, that's basically where I was going with it. But with the right delivery, it all comes together perfectly. When it comes to Anthony Kiedis, and well, he's a big part of this next song that we're discussing. So I think it's a good transition to talk about our next song, which is Breaking the Girl. The inspiration for this song was Anthony Kiedis's relationship with his girlfriend at the time, Carmen Hawk. I read his book, and a truly obnoxious character, in my opinion, Carmen Hawk, and definitely, if any parts of this book were exaggerated, I think some of these excerpts were most certainly. Hey, I wasn't there, but I just have a hard time believing some portions of it. But either way, a toxic relationship would to say that's an understatement in this case. And yeah, this one, the guitar on it was actually influenced by Zeppelin songs like The Battle of Evermore, which I can definitely hear in it. Drumming influenced by the Hendrix Experience, and very introspective for Anthony Kiedis, as he's also talking about his father, wondering if he's repeating his pattern. Yeah, this is one thing I sometimes say here is I wish I liked this song more than I did. And this is definitely one of those songs for me. And I think it's very oddly placed here. I think this is too early in the album for a song like this. And I think it just sounds too busy. I think that sometimes happens with Rick Rubin Productions. He's gotten criticism for it before, and I can definitely hear it on a song like this. And admittedly, I think this is well, the difference. I'll discuss why it doesn't hit as hard when we talk about a different song later. But I just think something about this just doesn't quite add up for me.
Heard. This is one of my favorite Chili Pepper songs of all time.
Well, there.
But that being said, I'm totally with you as far as, and I've already alluded to it, just the pacing of this album. In the 3 spot, I think it might have worked in the 2 spot. And to be honest, I know that seems like a little bit early in this album, as you were saying before, but coming after The Power of Equality for the new sound right there on number 2 spot, I think it might have worked out. But as far as this sound goes musically, this one, it always gets me. This one, you get this minimalistic Flea bass that he was talking about going into this album, or that he has talked about going into this album, trying to get away, playing half the amount of notes and letting everything else sing. You get that right off the cut here, and then you get that 12-string, beautiful 12-string guitar right over top of it. And then you sneak Chad Smith in there. And he's doing, in his own words, Mitch Mitchell-esque drumming here, which is just glorious. I always thought it was a real flute in here. It was something I learned throughout, that this was a mellotron with the flute patch throughout here. And I always loved the flute because before knowing where he really was going, growing up with this song, I used to think it was called Breaking the Curl. And then when I realized that it was Breaking the Girl, it just added a layer. So it always had this very surf-minded, especially because I thought it was Breaking the Curl, but a surf-mindedness about it. And I love that about this song. But the flute always threw me because it felt so feminine inside of this song. And I never understood where that was coming from, other than maybe there was a breakup inside of this. Long story short, to find out that he was in turmoil inside of his own life, wondering if he was going down the same path of this womanizing that he had seen his father do throughout. That second verse, once I knew that, it's a very candid look in the window here of Kiedis, and I love it because of that. This song always felt personal to me, just coming from his soul, and I always dug that. But you really get a candid look in here. That second verse is definitely one of my favorite ones that he wrote on this album. That cloudedness, or that too much going on here, I can only think is at its peak when we get into the junk jam, as I always called it, right here in the middle of this song. It always reminded me, and this was just a young me, but I had just saw Stomp on, at the Lyric, and I loved it, man. I love Stomp. I'd drum on everything in the whole house because of Stomp, which was crazy because Stomp was started touring in 91, and I probably didn't see it till like 94, 95, which is right around, looking back, when I started to listen to this album like in its entirety. But I always loved that, and that one always stuck to me. Yeah, I love this song though. I can't get enough of this song. This is at the top of all my playlists.
Yeah, it is a favorite of many. I'm the one in the minority here, and it was even the fourth single from the album, and it got a music video featuring River Phoenix. So
yeah, man.
That's pretty fun. And the next song was not a single, but a well-known catchphrase at the very least for this band, Funky Monks, same as their documentary. The song never says its title though, but yeah, I feel like this is more of a jam than an actual song. And it's a cool riff. I did find an interview clip where the interviewer actually says he doesn't like the song to
Really?
John Frusciante and Anthony Kiedis, and Frusciante's very defensive about it. He just says, it was a riff that Anthony came up with, and I expanded on it. And he even said, like, you don't even like the bass line at the end, and he had to concede that was good. And I think that's the best part of the song, actually. Again, it's fun to listen to, but again, more of a jam than a song, so I can't call it a highlight for me. And interestingly, I like the song that references it better than this song itself, Tip of My Tongue, off of the album we did discuss.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this one is, I go back to those constants, and, we can definitely sit here and say that there's a funky flea bass line on every single track, because there's gonna be. This one has that Pepper's fingerprint, and you get that minimalistic flea bass, and it opens up here for so much to go down. I love this song too, but this is also, I guess I'll go two-parter here. One, I'll get right into so I don't forget it. You're telling me that you didn't choose this as a single over If You Have to Ask? Like, you could have put this at 5th. I think this might have charted at 5th. But that's just me. 2, just like you said, it's fun to listen to, and we're going to see more as we go through here. There are songs on this album that are like a couple Kiedis verses, if you want to call them that, and then a jam, and this is one of them. So if you're looking for that, cool. I hope you could get out and see Peppers live because those jams go on forever. And for me, we've talked about this before, even coming from a jam band sense, for me on the albums, I'd rather see fully fleshed out pieces. And don't get me wrong, this was fleshed out in the sense where they knew where they were going to go, but a lot of this ends up sounding very jammy, which in my opinion, to a lot of listeners can be off-putting, as far as especially listeners like yourself that are looking for a very beautiful singer-songwriter lyrics inside, looking for some meaning, and unfortunately we don't get that a few times in, and this is one of them. But yeah, Funky Monks should have been the fifth single.
Interesting. I mean, I don't expect beautiful singer-songwriter for every song from this band in particular. Let me be clear about that. But I do hope it would at least be an actual song. And I'm not sure this fully hits that mark for me. But fortunately, I do think the next song does more so give us an actual song. It's our track 5, Suck My Kiss. Wonder what this could be about. But, you know, it's in this band's wheelhouse. They say write what you know, and that's what they did here, because this is what they know. It's definitely one of the best so far on the album, I think. It's got a really strong central riff to it, I think. I mean, as I said, is it anything deep? No, but is it a fun song to jam out to and party to? Yeah, it is, and it was actually the third single on the album, and I can see why. I don't think it would have been my first choice to make a single here, but I can see why it was, and it was a top 10 hit in Australia and New Zealand, so there you go.
Yeah. So at the very least, this one is so much power, so much sexual energy. I mean, it's titled Suck My Kiss, and this is what they're gonna give to you. This is that Chili Peppers. I won't even say Chili Peppers. This is that Kiedis, and I love this about Kiedis, but his lyrics, and especially in Suck My Kiss, have a beautiful way of like dancing and walking the line of raunchiness while staying away from blatantly being crass. Like, there's so much tongue-in-cheek innuendo. It doesn't end up being classless, in my opinion, even in a song like Suck My Kiss. And Suck My Kiss, in that same sense, always reminded me of a Prince type of song, you know, a very walking that line of sexuality and not being classless, as I had said before. But yeah, this one, man, power, and I'm sailing. That used to be a call to battle for me back in the day, man. You hear that and you automatically know, at the very least, you better get your butt to the pit because the game is afoot. This is one of my all-time favorites. I didn't even say it before, but there's a very hard part about going through this one is there's a lot of nostalgia that I didn't even like put into account when I said let's do this one. So it's tough to pull away that nostalgia. This one, full of it. This was an anthem for many years for me.
But I do agree with you about the walking the line. I do think they're able to do so on this song. I'm not sure they are able to on every song, but I think they did it all right on this one. But we are going to completely switch gears for our next song. We're going to get a bit more introspective with track number 6, which is I Could Have Lied. This song was inspired by Anthony Kiedis' very brief relationship with Sinead O'Connor, who was pretty close to the peak of her popularity at this time, actually. It looks like, from what I've read. And they had a good time together, he said, but she broke up with him on the answering machine. And that really hurt him a lot. And she even said she was moving from LA. So he just had a lot of thoughts. He called his bandmate John, and they wrote a song musically inspired by Hendrix's All Along the Watchtower while writing about how he felt. Finished this song in a few hours, done at 5 a.m, and he drops the tape in Sinead O'Connor's mailbox, and here's nothing from her.
You know, she denies to this day that ever happened. Like, the whole entire relationship. It's so mind-blowing. And I almost wasn't going to say anything, but it It irks me. I love me some Kiedis, and he has his faults, but like she straight up will be like, nah, he was head over heels for me, but it was never anything. I've read a quote going through this that she had said, and I'm paraphrasing, but she had said something to the length of, if I ever did kiss him, I would have to wash my mouth out for weeks. She's very, very up in arms, like, no, it never happened. And she shares other anecdotes, but it's like, it's wild to think that a man, I like a man at this level of his sexuality of we've already gone and talked about where he was coming from with his father and whatnot, but like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it was something that he would make up, especially after pouring his heart out on a track like this. And it always irked me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you have a point there. It just seems, I don't know a lot about her, but it seems like her to say something like that. And admittedly, I do think there was some appeal for him because of her celebrity at this time. I mean, she had one of the top hits the year right before this album with her cover of Nothing Compares to You. So I do think there's some appeal there for that, to have been with a really big music star at the time. But the song itself, I think, is very sincere. I don't doubt the sincerity of what I'm hearing on this song. And it's the most spare song on the album so far, but I think this is a good placement for it. And this song really hits harder for me than Breaking the Girl. And having read the memoir, I think it's because of the subject of the song. It sounds like the feelings here were a bit deeper as opposed to the subject of Breaking the Girl. That relationship was just mostly sexual, it seems. It was very much based on sex. And this seemed to not be as based on that, more of an emotional connection, and that's why this song really hits harder for me. Yeah, this is definitely one of the I would say the best so far, actually, on this album. I really enjoyed this one.
Nice. I love to hear that. This coming right out of Suck My Kiss and going into this somber bring down. We've been talking about, pacing and how it sort of faulted, and I'm right with you. This one couldn't have been in a better spot on the album. It hits so hard. It hits so perfect. We come out of Suck My Kiss to this beautiful acoustic for Shanti, just for Shanti and Kiedis right here off the beginning until the boys start to creep in here. And then even just talking about the guitar, we get this beautiful acoustic. It has that sadness on it. It has that feeling behind it. And then when Frusciante starts to almost be angry in his sadness in the lyrics around the 2 minutes, it switches to this electric. And it's not like a distorted electric guitar or anything like that, but it has this sort of sad anger to it for me that really sticks. When he hits the "She Struck Me and I'm Fucked Up Now," it just switches, and it switches seamlessly without you really, if you're not concentrating, you almost miss it, but it's very powerful. I love this piece. I've always loved this piece. It really sings out. I can see where you're at on best so far, because it has that power inside of it. Another really candid personal look inside of Kiedis on this one.
Yeah, but it can't all be too down here. We got to have some fun, and we're going to get back into some funkiness with our next track, which is Mellowship Slinky in B major. Great title, not going to lie. Yeah, this is definitely a stream of consciousness tune. Lots of references to authors, musicians, and LA. I enjoy it. I think it's a good palate cleanser and a good after we did I Could Have Lied and all that, I think it's good to where we're gonna go next on the album with some more upbeat stuff. And it's the funkiest song we've heard in a few tracks, I think, too, which I like about it. I mean, it's definitely random, but I can appreciate a stream of consciousness because it's real. I can appreciate it. So, yeah, I liked this one all right. Not one of the very top best here, but it did what it had to do.
Yeah, Mellowship Slinky in B major. You're right. That's such a cool title, and it has that coolness about it, that levity that in my opinion you get in a title like that. But I'm right with you. I love the way this song brings the album back up. It's a solid composition for everyone here. Hot tea take, this one never really grabbed me the hardest out of the album, you know. And I really, the hot tea take inside of that is, to this day, it always takes me back to Funky Monks, and it's almost like this was like a jammed version of Funky Monks, in a musicality type of way, just in its composition. It's not up there at the top, like you said. For me, it's a fun one though, and it is. I like using palate cleanser here. Usually we use palate cleanser on songs that are a little shorter and whatnot, but this one brings you away from that sadness real quick, so it stands correct there. It's a cool tune. It is a cool tune.
Yeah. I say palate cleanser because the next few songs they're upbeat, but they're quite a bit more intense and have concrete points to them, for better or for worse. The first of those is The Righteous and the Wicked. This is a song, it's described as a song about the battle between war and peace. I think this is a fantastic song. It's definitely the heaviest we've heard so far here, but great chorus, great riff. I'd love to hear this live just to sing along to the chorus. And I think it's a stronger social commentary piece than the opener, actually. I wasn't sure this band would be the best at that, but I think they did it quite well here. And I really love that we reference Marvin Gaye 20 years after the What's Going On album. That I had to appreciate that too. So yeah, really not much more to say for me other than I think this song is awesome.
Yeah, I'm right with you. You touched on so many of my notes. I love this song, man. It almost has a little bit of a Mother's Milk in the way that it is very heavily rock infused. But man, you talk about, I love the fact that you said you would love to sing along with this, because that's, for me, this song is right there, and it lends itself to you for that. I love the way it's written. The work here, especially between Flea and Frusciante at the 231, this back and forth are like right on top. Playing the same piece is chef's kiss to that one. I love this song. Always have. It never in the hardcore scene, maybe it's caught on, but this is one you could put on and people would know it was Peppers because you hear Frusciante and you know, or I'm sorry, Kiedis and you know, or really whoever and you know, but it's not one that people are very up on. It's not one that is a giant hit for them. And I always love this one. I was always frustrated that this one didn't get its legs like the others did. This could have been another single, in fact.
Oh, I think it should have been, absolutely. I would have picked this over at least honestly, at least two of the singles, maybe three of them. I adore this song a lot. And we're just going to keep it going, though, with one of those singles. Smack dab in the middle of this album, track number 9, Give It Away. This song was actually inspired by the singer Nina Hagen. And she was talking about giving things away and how it just feels good to be selfless. And obviously, it was based on the riff and the jam, and they put this thing to it. And this was the lead single, which makes sense. It's definitely an earworm, for better or for worse. This song's become ubiquitous over the years. I think it's safe to say, this is, people think Chili Peppers. This might very well be the first song that they think of.
Agreed.
It's their most played track live ever by quite a bit. So, signature song, I'm not going to lie. The first few times I heard this song, I thought it was pretty stupid. I thought, it's really repetitive. I don't like the guy's voice. I appreciate it fine now. I think if you're in the right mood for it, it's a perfectly fun song. It's a very fun song. It's definitely a goofy song. And I don't think it makes a whole ton of sense. It's really about that chorus and the riffs, and it does sound pretty cool. And it didn't catch on at first, but once K-Rock in LA started playing it, this album and single really took off, and it was an MTV staple as well. So even if it's not my favorite song here, it's hard to imagine the arc of this band without this song. So for that, you have to give it its respect.
Yeah, you do. You have to give it its respect. You're not alone. Even back then, I remember hearing that same, I won't even say polarizing viewpoint, but that's, you would, about half the people be like, I love that song. And even the people that love Peppers, some of them would be like, man, this is a silly song. Like, this is just an out there song. Like you said, it came from a jam. And this band, and we've talked a little bit about it so far, but you don't necessarily equate them with a band that is jamming all the time. Why not? I don't know, but a lot of people don't. But this one, coming from a jam into what it grew to be, like you said, something that you couldn't imagine the Peppers without, is mind-blowing to me. I tell you what, though, this deep dive, of course, I go through who's playing what on what. I never, and I've heard this song, I'll say my normal 1 million times. I never heard the Jews harp in the background of this song ever until I read that there was one, and then went back and listened, and now I can never unhear it. Not that it takes away from anything. It's just so wild for me to think that was there, and I never knew it was. Yeah, give it away, man. It is I like it, but it's wild to think that this one is the one that propelled them out of all of them.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they kind of had this. I think they did similar songs to this better in the future.
Heard.
Just based on their hits, frankly. So there's that. But again, you can't think of this band without this song. So we have to give it its respect just for that. And there we have it. Give it away. We've reached our smack dab in the middle of this album. And right following it is our title track. It was decided this was the best title for the album, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, even if they knew it wasn't the best highlight. They didn't think it was the highlight of the album or the song everyone needed to flock to, but a good title, and it is a good album title. So this song, oh boy. The verses, we have Anthony Kiedis doing his best Barry White impression. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds a little creepy. This song, it has a good groove. It's catchy, but you talked earlier about how we gotta straddle a line of the innuendo and being out there without being crass. This song doesn't do that. This song is fucking disgusting. I mean, come on, kissing her virginity? That's disgusting. And aromatic like a flower? No. And yeah, I can't get the whole tone of the song is not there. It's not it for me. This is easily my least favorite here, and you do not have to put a gun to my head to say that. This song is just, it's just nasty.
Nasty. The Blood Sugar Sex Magik. It is wild, man. It is wild. I don't necessarily hit the nastiness, and I can see where you're coming from, and some of that is wild stuff. Maybe I expect it here. Maybe it's the fact that I've heard it so many times that it doesn't hit the way. I don't think it ever really hit me that hard. The way I do enjoy the way that he uses the imagery of like a witch's cauldron or like an apothecary of sexuality or like this magic in there, and he dances with that. This one, though, even from back in the day, this one always was like it always dragged for me. It was just slow, especially after Give It Away. Again, I talk about the Rubin genius, but this one is one where I say was layered way too much. This one always sound cluttered to me, and just too many layers going on here. This as it's wild. This is my least favorite track on the album as well. Even it being the namesake of the album, it is just it never hit. The song never hit for me. I do not like this song. I never have. I think it's a very weak song from them. For different reasons, but still, it is not. It's not my one. Never has been.
All right, so we both don't like it at all, and I'm happy to hear that, even if it is for different reasons. I think that just kind of tells you what you need to know. If you're gonna skip a song here, skip this one. So, but fortunately, we are not going to stay in that territory. We're going to get real back to our introspection with our next song, another Chili Peppers signature, Under the Bridge. This song is about Kiedis's addiction battle. He was at this point in time sober for a few years. He'd had major drug issues. Their original guitarist, Hillel Slovak, died from a heroin overdose in 1988. This was a very close to home subject for Anthony Kiedis, and he didn't even think he was going to record it at first. He just wrote it as a poem to get his thoughts out there, but Ruben and the rest of the band said, no, you have to record it. It's too good. And, I mean, history has shown that they were right. The titular bridge in the song is located in downtown LA. Kiedis has not revealed where it is. Obviously, it's a bridge where they used to shoot some drugs, which don't do that, kids. But despite that dark subject matter, this song was a huge hit. It was the second single. It was released in March of 1992, and it went all the way to #2 on the Hot 100 in June of that year, right behind Jump by Criss Cross, which talk about a contrast right there. Honestly, seeing the hits of 1992, I wasn't alive then, but it's wild to me that this caught on in the way it did, because it really is not like the other songs. It's certainly not like Jump by Criss Cross, but even in comparison to the ballads, I mean, this is also the year of songs like End of the Road and Save the Best for Last. At the end of the year, Whitney's I Will Always Love You. This is definitely not along those lines either. So, it's pretty wild to me that this was as huge of a hit as it was. I mean, this charted higher than Smells Like Teen Spirit. But I do think it's a great song. And again, it is real. We're writing from a real place. And it showed that these alternative rockers really were a force to be reckoned with. They just weren't some underground phenomenon. And we didn't always see that reflected on the Hot 100. But this is one case where we really did. That underground really went up to the mainstream here.
Yeah, this song was everywhere. I cannot exaggerate that enough. This song was everywhere. This is their sing-along song at the shows. You know, this has everybody. And in my opinion, when I think about the sing-along at these shows, I always think about the ladies singing along on this one. But adding to your comment of you know, it's so wild to see it so high and charting so high, I think at the very least, this one offered itself to a wider audience compared to the rest of the album. That being most deaf. That being said, this song's beauty came from real sadness, and you know, not to beat it into the ground, but we're looking at this very personal poetry that may never have been released except if it wasn't for his brothers in arms and this producer saying, let's do it. I love this song on the same kind of level of learning about the Pumpkins that we were talking about last week, where these songs that in my youth were happy songs, they have this sadness and this real feeling that drives them that I learned later on in life. Now, that being said, this sad track comes to Frusciante, and Frusciante's quoted saying, I had to write a happy lick. I had to write a more uplifting lick on this because I wasn't going to write You know, I wasn't going to write anything as sad as this musically, which is this other beautiful piece of this song. And that is that beautiful, beautiful contrast between the sadness and the not joyous musicality of this song, but beautiful musicality of this song that I thought always hit. This song also crescendos in such a cinematic sense that it almost ends up sounding contrived, but it ends with this crescendo culminating in this full choir joining in. You know, so it had a lot of those sounds that resonated across all of these different listening groups, but it came from that sadness, and the beauty comes from sadness. That's where we get these hits a lot of the time, and this one it's up there, man. This is a jam piece. I played this live many times, and while it might seem like a very easily picked up and played song, this is a very, very intricate composition, and I have a huge level of respect for that as well, as far as this song goes. Love this song.
Yes, but interestingly, Frusciante, he worked hard on this riff, but he came to resent this song's popularity in particular. He was uncomfortable with fame in general, but this song really made the band household names in another way, and it even helped Give It Away get more exposure and get to the point that it's gotten to. And when the band played on SNL, which is definitely a sign that you've made it if you're the musical act on SNL, Frusciante decided to throw Anthony Kiedis off and play a different riff. And the performance actually went pretty well considering that. They did their thing, and album sales went way up after it, but it just showed he was like not comfortable with how big the song got.
He wasn't comfortable with how big they got. He never wanted to go away from that underground scene that they thrived in, and this album's popularity really messed him up. We even saw him leave the band in the middle, very close to the end, I think, but in the last third of this tour, slowly becoming this just stand on the side of the stage like we saw at Saturday Night Live. Have you ever seen that clip?
I have, yes.
It is the most awkward feeling, knowing that he is playing just this off the top of the head riff here. And he just even said, man, he really felt like it was a stab in the back, standing there and finishing that song after that. And it had to be tough. That was a huge FU in any musician, in any band sense. I would never wish that on my worst enemy. That had to be tough. Now they're still raging to this day, and that says a lot about the musicality and the brotherhood inside of that. But this was a tough time. He definitely did not handle this well. I won't go down the Frusciante hole that he went into after this, but he did not handle the whole fame thing well at all.
Yeah, and suffice it to say, he didn't come back to the Chili Peppers until the end of the decade.
Shit, he didn't come back to reality until the end of the decade. I mean, he was doing solo work, but you would see sparse. We talked about this a little bit the last time we talked about Peppers, but you would see just shots of him, and he was not in a good place. But it just adds more to the level of beauty coming from sadness. But yeah, he did not do well with this. But
of course, they've always had the most commercial success with Frusciante and the band, easily.
Hot tea take, he's the best guitarist they've ever had.
I don't think that's a hot tea take.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of the Red Hot Chili Peppers camp out there that would be behind Navarro, but
Navarro has other skills, I think we could say.
Yeah. But he definitely is my favorite. He's the man.
Yes, and we're gonna see some more fun from him. We're gonna go back to a lighter tone on our next song, and really for the most part the rest of the album. We're not gonna go back to Under the Bridge too much. We're gonna be more in party mode for the rest of this.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
And that starts with our 12th track, Naked in the Rain. Based on the title, you might think this is another song in the vein of Suck My Kiss, but it is not. It is actually about how the Chili Peppers love animals and the environment. So, who knew? But it's in the fun, goofy way you expect from this band. Like, of course, they reference Dr. Dolittle, and before Eddie Murphy even played Dr. Dolittle, interestingly. But yeah, I really enjoy this song. I think you just hear a band having fun. They sound tight here, and they're having a good time. I love the crunchy guitar, love the rhythm section here. Yeah, I think it comes together real well. We've got some funk, but we've also got some of the heavier rock sounds, and this is a good synthesis of those two elements here. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, you're in my notes again, but first note, FUN in caps with 4 exclamations. Fun is the name of the game in Naked in the Rain for me. You really can. You can feel them having fun. You can feel the band doing what they did best and just vibing off each other. You said it, but the percussion here, I mean, Chad Smith is murdering. Not that he always doesn't, but this is such a really great track for him. And everybody really, but Chad really comes across. This is a fun song. I've always loved this song. This is another, in my opinion, underplayed Pepper song.
Yeah. Yeah, not a hit of theirs. I don't imagine it's played a lot live, but it should be, I would hope. But
I hope so.
Who knows? But we're gonna keep the fun going with our next song, which is Apache Rose Peacock. Great title. This song is a love letter to the city of New Orleans, and this is definitely a song I do think you have to have been to New Orleans to fully appreciate this song. Like, it's a fun song on its own, but New Orleans is a wild place. Like, even if you don't really party hard there, you just observe so much there. And it's a really wild place. I went there 5 years ago, and I would love to go back. But I mean, even just like the history there with the voodoo supernatural stuff, it's a wild place. And you gotta have a wild song to go with it, and I think this is it. So, yeah, on that level, I really enjoyed this song, and it just makes me want to go back to Louisiana, and I think they should use this in commercials for New Orleans. It probably wouldn't work for everybody, but it works for me.
You said it so great. It embodies that feeling. It's another one. It's great to see fun tracks end off this album. We've tackled some other things, but this one just, it emanates fun, man. I mean, you even get a rare treat of Flea playing his first instrument here. You get some Flea trumpet in the background. You get all types of stuff. It's very reminiscent of that New Orleans feel, that parade feel, that just celebration feel, and you get it all the way through here. This is a cool composition, and back in the day I used to think that this was another cluttered one, but in going through it this week, I have to take that away from myself. I'm no longer allowed to think that, because it's really perfectly placed and perfectly stacked upon itself. I enjoy this one.
Yeah, and it really, the sound does fit with New Orleans in the Chili Peppers way. It's not straight Dixieland jazz you're hearing, but it's got enough of that funk to it that embodies, I think, that the spirit of one of the most musical cities in the United States.
Yeah.
So on that level, you gotta be a bit busy. It's New Orleans.
Yep.
It's always busy. There's always something going on there. This is Mardi Gras we're hearing here. So, you know, it's gotta be that way. I think it works really well here.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna, you know, keep the party going now with our next song, the greeting song, which does have an interesting backstory. So Rick Rubin made it pretty clear to the band that he really didn't care about like socio-political lyrics like on the song like Naked in the Rain or The Righteous and the Wicked. He wasn't really there for that. He said he liked songs about girls and cars. And he challenged Anthony Kiedis to write a song about girls and cars. And so he did. And Kiedis hates this song. He doesn't feel connected to it. General Motors even wanted to use this song in an ad campaign, and he said no. And well, that I'm sure he lost a lot of money saying no to that, but well, he's got enough of it. So I guess he was in a position where he could say no. Must be nice. Because I wouldn't be saying no. Let me tell you that. Yeah, and he mentions wanting to write about stuff that other people weren't, but I think they did this kind of song their way. This doesn't sound like if Motley Crue wrote a song about girls and cars. This is the funky Chili Peppers way. I think it's a fun song. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Do I think it's the best song here? No, I don't even enjoy it as much as the previous like few tracks right before it, but I do think I think it's a perfectly fun song, and it doesn't take away from the album. So there we have it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't take away from the album, but inside of the genius that I've been speaking, I think this is a misstep for Mr. Rubin, because maybe they didn't know this then, but you don't get the best output from these guys if you put them in a box, if you put them and say, this is what you need to write about. And it's crazy. This is one of my favorite ones to really dive into this week and read about, because I never knew that back then. But this song always felt insincere. And I always thought that this was their way of to like almost do a farce, a parody of something like Motley Crue and something like that. That's what it always sang to me as. Now knowing that it will, the insincerity probably is still there. I still feel it, but now knowing that it's because they were told to write about this, I can see that. This song fills up with sick musicianship throughout, and it's a great live vessel. Like the composition is there, but it just doesn't feel sincere, and I've always felt like that. It's not my favorite. It's an okay song, but this ain't Chili Peppers to me, you know? Even I do agree with you in the fact that they made that type of song their own, but it was always a parody. It always had some little bit of anger behind it to me when I was listening to it back in the day. So it's wild to find out where it came from.
Yeah, it does. But we're going to go away from that anger for sure on our next song into something more reflective here, but not musically reflective in the same way the lyrics are, which is our 15th song here, My Lovely Man. This is a tribute to original guitarist Hillel Slovak, who, again, as we mentioned earlier, did die from a heroin overdose in 1988. He was only 26 years old. And he was a very good friend of Mr. Kiedis's, and so he writes, this is about how he misses his friend. And again, a very real thing to be writing about. We've talked about a lot of songs about the losses of friends lately on this podcast. So there is that. But I do appreciate where the song's coming from. I do think it's a sincere song, but it's really almost misleadingly upbeat. And I'm not sure the juxtaposition works completely. I think if we're going to do an upbeat song about our dead friends, we got to do it the Janet Jackson Together Again way, which is like, I know you're smiling back at me and we're going to one day be dancing again. This doesn't do that. And like, there's no snark or sarcasm here, I think, to offset the fact that this song is as upbeat as it is. It's not bad. I just think it's I just think it's a bit odd here.
Yeah. you're right there with me. It's crazy because I always felt almost guilty thinking that about this song, knowing
I
what it
know.
was about. But it's the truth behind it, is that contrast. Even though I think it was meant to be there, it doesn't hit the way it should, in my opinion, on this one. This always, it always seemed like trying to, and I'm sort of giving it a Silver Linings Playbook here, but it almost felt like it was trying to smile through the sadness, but everybody knew the smile was fake. But I don't even think it's that deep, as far as it just doesn't quite hit for me as a listener.
Yeah, and it's not that you can't do an upbeat rock song about death. I mean, speaking of it, when we did the latest Foo Fighters album, we have multiple songs that do it, but they have the intensity musically to match what we're talking about. This is so light musically. And yeah, I think that's just kind of why it doesn't all the way fit. But listen to our Foo Fighters episode if you haven't already.
Yeah.
But
and they were younger too,
that too.
That depth, yeah, that depth definitely comes later on in Kiedis and on all of them. So yeah, maybe we'll chalk it up to a little bit of youngness as well. But yeah, not my fave.
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, same here. But we are going to switch gears completely from that in possibly the biggest tonal 180 here on the album, because we really go to a different place with our penultimate song here, track 16, Sir Psycho Sexy. I'm taking this as a song about all the great sex that Anthony Kiedis has. Definitely the most explicit song here in terms of sexuality, and that's saying something considering the title track. But this one doesn't bother me really, because it's very tongue-in-cheek, and clearly these lyrics, it's very like fantasy. There's like the sexual fantasy, like the lady cop pulls you over and one thing leads to another and yada yada yada. Like that's very fantasy. That is not real life. It doesn't happen every day. That's what you see on TV. And because of that, I can give this song, I don't think this song's too crass because of that, because clearly it's not real. And now the problem is this song is over 8 minutes long, and it doesn't need to be. It does end out as a jam, and it's not, for me, even a strong enough jam to justify the length. We hear much better jams on the album in shorter songs. So I'm not quite getting it. I feel like we got the point well before that. So this didn't need to be as long as it was. That's my complaint with this one.
Yeah, I'll get to why I think this is that long, but going back to the start of this song, I always pictured this as like a Godzilla Anthony Kiedis. Like, this is the character of an exaggerated to this one was just exaggerated. This is an exaggerated fantasy Kiedis. And I always love that about this song. This song, I agree with you, even though it might be explicit, it loses the crassness because it has that fantasy line. And that that it's fantasy. You know that it's not even tongue-in-cheek. It's like on purpose fantastical stories in this, and I always dug this song has fun. And even though it sounds like that last 3 minutes is a jam, I have to think that it was part of this over exaggerated character and that character bleeding out to this song. But I also, and this is pure speculation, coming in at this track, at the 16th track, I think they put this here because this jam is very methodical and almost feels like a farewell piece and a here's what's coming soon to this album. Now, I am saying that in hindsight. I am saying that after years and years of listening to the Peppers and what they have become. But it's not the jam, or I won't even say the jam, but this last 3-minute piece that ends up sounding like a jam is very methodical, and for me isn't wasted because it's right here on the album. If it was anywhere else, I have to say it would end up being just scrapped out as a jam in my mind. But I feel like this is that farewell, especially with the way this album ends, which we might as well just go to now.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a minute-long cover of a very old song by bluesman Robert Johnson, who's been called the first rock star. He died at the age of 27 in 1938, but his songs have endured, and they've served as the blueprint for bands like the Rolling Stones to do their thing. So, really important part of music history. This song, They're Red Hot, is one of his. This is a shortened version of it, and obviously it's intentional. It's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This isn't really bluesy at all, though. It's this band doing it, but it's a fun, goofy closer, and I think that it's perfect to end this album because while it's not their debut, in some ways it did serve as their debut, considering this was their first album with Warner Brothers, and they were going to be getting a much bigger push than they'd ever gotten before. It was almost as if they knew they were going to be brought out to their largest audience yet, and they were being introduced to a lot of people with this album, and so you gotta end it with who you are, and in this case, they're red hot.
They're red hot. I mean, they play this at a breakneck speed. Just, you can tell they're just having a little blast with it. It's a crazy little goofy ender. Now, here's where I go back to, and I was trying not to bust this up, but that's why the end of Sir Psycho Sexy sings to me, is because I swear, and I tried to find it, I'm convinced when I had this album that was a hidden track on the CD, but it looks like this is just the way I always took it. In the land of 90s albums, I always thought this was the hidden track. Like, I never realized that this was the final track on the album, and that's why the end of Psycho Sexy always made more sense. But yeah, this is a very goofy little ender, and off their debut album, a very
well, not their debut.
Oh, yeah, but you're saying like the debut to the world, you know. It is it's fun to say the least. It's corny. It's exactly what you would expect from a hidden track. But it's a fun little ender.
Yes, and there we have it for Blood Sugar Sex Magik from one of your very top bands for sure, the Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Wow. What a journey. 17 songs. But the question is, what's the grade? What's it come down to?
The old grade. Stripping the nostalgia off it, it was a really fun time listening back through and really diving into this album. It has so many peaks inside of it, and the musicianship is unparalleled in so many aspects. These guys are great at what they still do, and they were here in 91. Unfortunately for me, and as an older listener, but I say that in the sense of when I got this, you know, when this sound was introduced to me, the valleys in this one are a lot worse than I remember them. There are several spots in this album that really don't stick the landing, and it was wild to hear that because I was listening with very critical ears. I will never say that this album isn't a great album, but it definitely has some spots in it that almost uncharacteristically, again, don't stick that landing. And for that, I'm going to have to give the Red Hot Chili Peppers Blood Sugar Sex Magik a B-. I
was not expecting that. Wow. I'm gonna give it a solid B. I was not expecting to have a higher grade than you.
There you go.
I do agree that the valleys are significant, and this album, I think with CDs being so new, they just wanted to put as much as they could onto an album, and this is one case where it definitely could have used some editing, and some more streamlining, but I do think that the highs are high.
Yeah.
And I do think this is a band having fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which is kind of even for the weaker songs. I can't get too mad at some of the weaker songs because they're really not taking themselves too seriously. But I do wonder, like, this is so often called their best album, and I'm like, I don't know the whole discography, but it just really makes me wonder. It's like, is this the best this band can do for an album? I would hope not, because it's a good album, but I don't know if it fully lives up to its reputation, because the lows are definitely not, we can't overlook them. So that's kind of where I'm standing here with this one. Yeah, there we go. What's your track pick of the album?
My favorite track is easily Breaking the Girl.
Okay.
I shouldn't say easily. It's very hard, but it's a very hard second for Under the Bridge, but Breaking the Girl all the way.
Yeah, I mean that's a favorite of many. Mine is The Righteous and the Wicked.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that song too. What a banger. There we have it, the Peppers.
The Peppers. And it's wild to say, but I'm with you, man. Everybody has always said this was the best album. I will leave that open to interpretation, and maybe even open to us talking about some more Chili Peppers down the road. There is plenty of evolution inside of their sound. There's plenty of music to be talked about. So maybe that leaves us with a, as I say, a silver lining playbook moment here. Maybe we'll talk about them somewhere down the road.
I can see that definitely happening, because there's a lot to explore here, and they definitely are still out there with the fans. Actually, we got a big bump on our Return of the Dream Canteen episode recently, so thank you, listeners, for doing that. That just made it all the more clear for us that we needed to go back to the Chili Peppers. But we are not going to be doing a repeat, I don't think, for this next one, are we? Because it's your pick, and you gotta let us know how we're ending your month off.
Are we sticking around here? Are we sticking around in the old rock and grunge sound? No. Now, we're going to end this one off with for our new listeners, you might not know this about me, but I am a huge fan of a little group called the Fugees, and their front woman, Miss Lauryn Hill, has always been one of my favorite voices. So we're going to end this one off with a trip through her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
There we have it. Yeah, we talk about this album being acclaimed. We're going to step up from that for this one. A very important album to many that turns 25 this year. I'm excited to dive into it. It is one I'm going into more familiar than I was with this one, but I think there's always something to be said for that album, and certainly a lot of tea with Miss Lauryn Hill.
You already know we're gonna be in it for the long run on that one, but
yeah, I am thinking we are, because oh boy, always something going on. All right, yep, there we have it, Lauryn Hill. We're gonna get a little soulful, a little hip hop, a bit of everything with that one. But yeah, I'm excited for it, and yeah, I hope you all are too. So in the meantime, you better watch out for that thing. Our next episode.
Peace.